Rain lashed against the windows of the dimly lit bar, the kind of night that carried whispers of bad luck. Inside, laughter and music filled the smoky air, but for Emma, every sound felt distant, muffled by the storm raging inside her. She sat quietly in the corner, hands folded tightly in her lap, trying to make herself invisible. Her navy blue gown shimmered under the flickering lights, an elegant piece that had once made her feel beautiful. Now, surrounded by sneering faces and whispered taunts, it felt like a target painted on her back. The bar was crowded with the city's elite, people who once pretended to be her friends. Emma had come here for a charity gala, one she'd been invited to before her life took a drastic turn. Before the gossip started. Before she married Alexander Hayes, the billionaire everyone in the city either envied or hated. The rumors had spread like wildfire, that she married him for money, that she trapped him, that she wasn't good enough for him. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew what they'd been through. Emma tried to ignore the cold eyes and biting whispers, but she could feel them cutting into her. She wasn't supposed to be here alone. Alexander had been delayed at a meeting and promised he'd join her soon. She told herself she could handle it. She'd handled worse. But then they walked in. 3 women, Lila, Bianca, and Chloe. The self-proclaimed queens of high society. They were all charm and venom, perfectly wrapped in designer gowns and polished smiles. Once, they'd been Emma's friends. Now, they were her tormentors. Well, Lila drawled, setting her champagne glass down on Emma's table without asking. If it isn't Mrs. Hayes. Tell me, Emma, did your husband forget to buy you a new dress this season? Or is this last year's charity look? Laughter rippled through the group. Emma's fingers tightened on her clutch, but she stayed silent. Bianca leaned closer, her perfume thick and suffocating. You know, I almost feel bad for you, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. Must be exhausting pretending to belong here. Everyone knows you were a nobody before Alex found you. Emma's heart thudded painfully, but she kept her chin high. Excuse me, she said softly, trying to stand. But Chloe blocked her path. Don't leave, she sneered. We're just getting started. Before Emma could move, Lila reached out, fingers curling into the delicate fabric of her gown. Let's see how much the Cinderella dress cost, shall we? There was a sharp rip, the sound of silk tearing. Gasps echoed across the room. Emma froze, the fabric falling loosely from her shoulder as humiliation burned her skin. Lila's grin faltered as the reality of what she'd done set in, but it was too late. The entire bar was watching now, eyes wide, phones raised. Stop, Emma whispered, her voice trembling. Please, just stop. But they only laughed harder. Tears welled up in her eyes. She turned to run, clutching the torn fabric to her chest, when the door slammed open. A gust of wind rushed in, scattering napkins and drawing everyone's attention. Alexander Hayes stepped inside. The chatter died instantly. The man carried power like a shadow, tall, commanding, dressed in a black tailored suit that seemed made for him. His dark eyes scanned the room, sharp and unreadable, until they landed on her. And in that moment, the entire world seemed to go still. Emma's breath hitched. He moved through the crowd without a word, his expression carved in ice. When he reached her, his gaze softened just for a second, before turning hard again as he saw the torn gown. He took off his coat and wrapped it gently around her shoulders. Who did this? His voice was low but lethal, each word dripping with quiet fury. No one dared to speak. Alexander turned to the trembling trio, who now looked like cornered animals. Was it you? He asked. Lila swallowed hard. It was just a joke. He cut her off with a glare that could have frozen fire. A joke? His voice rose, sharp enough to make people flinch. You humiliated my wife. You touched her. You think that's a joke? Bianca stepped forward, stammering, we didn't mean to. But Alexander wasn't listening. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and said calmly, security. I want these women out. Now. Permanently banned from every Hayes property and event. Lila's face drained of color. Wait, you can't. I can, he said coldly. And I just did. Within minutes, 2 security guards appeared. The women protested, pleaded, even cried, but Alexander didn't flinch. Emma stood still, shaking slightly. She'd never seen him like this, so controlled, yet so terrifyingly protective. When the door finally closed behind the bullies, silence hung in the air. All eyes were on them. Alexander turned back to her, his voice softening. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak. He lifted her chin gently, making her meet his gaze. "Then let's get out of here." He led her outside, shielding her from the rain with his coat. The valet hurried over with the car, but Alexander stopped before opening the door. "Emma," he said quietly. "You should never have to face that alone." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I thought I could handle it," she whispered. "I didn't want to make a scene." He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "You don't have to handle anything alone, not anymore. You're my wife. And anyone who hurts you, answers to me." The sincerity in his voice broke something inside her. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing quietly as he held her close under the rain. When they finally got home, he sat her down by the fire, draping a blanket around her shoulders. He knelt before her, eyes full of concern. "You're stronger than they'll ever be," he said softly. "But don't confuse strength with silence." She looked at him through tearful eyes. "You really think I'm strong?" He smiled faintly. "Stronger than anyone I know. You faced the worst of them tonight and you still held your head high." For the first time that evening, she smiled, a small, trembling smile that reached her eyes. The next morning, the gossip columns exploded, not with rumors about Emma, but with praise. Videos had gone viral of Alexander defending her, of the bullies being escorted out. Public opinion flipped overnight. People called her graceful under fire, the woman who stood tall against cruelty. But for Emma, none of that mattered. What mattered was the man beside her, the one who didn't just rescue her, but reminded her of her worth. Days later, she received an invitation. Another charity gala. She hesitated at first, remembering the humiliation. But Alexander took her hand. "Go," he said with a smile. "Show them who you are." That night, when she walked into the grand ballroom in a new silver gown, head high, heart steady, the crowd fell silent. Whispers turned to admiration. And standing at the back, Alexander watched her with pride glowing in his eyes. She'd come full circle. No longer the woman who hid in the corner, afraid of cruel words. She was Emma Hayes, strong, dignified, unbreakable. And as the music swelled and she smiled under the chandeliers, she knew one thing for certain. You don't need to tear someone down to shine. Real strength is standing tall after being broken, and real love is having someone who helps you rebuild. In that bar, she'd lost her gown. But she'd found her voice. And that made her the richest woman in the room.